Drop whatever you are doing and pay close attention, because what comes next could hand you back hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars this year alone, and throw a steel wall around everything you have quietly and patiently built over a lifetime. The Supreme Court of the United States just delivered a 7-2 decision, and it has done what senior advocates have spent years trying to force through every legal channel available. It has torn down the single greatest courtroom barrier between older Americans and the most comprehensive overhaul of elder care policy this nation has seen in decades. If you have crossed the threshold of 60, or if someone you love has, this ruling lands directly in your life. Your medication bills, your monthly Social Security payment, the conditions inside nursing facilities, the wall between your retirement savings and the people who want to steal it, your right to grow old inside your own home, and the mental health coverage that Medicare has always fallen short on. All of it is now in motion, and the piece of this story that is getting buried under the headlines is this. A portion of what this ruling sets in motion will not reach you automatically. Certain protections require you to move first. Some carry deadlines. Some demand that your information be updated with the correct federal agency before a specific window shuts. If you sit still and wait, some of this money and some of these protections will pass right by you. So right now, we are going through every significant change this decision unlocks, in language that needs no legal dictionary. What changed? What you are now owed, and the exact moves you need to make to collect it. Do not leave before the end, because the action steps are the whole point, and they are coming. Here is the foundation you need before anything else makes sense, because the 7-2 margin is not just a number, and most reporting is glossing right over why it matters. For a long time, elder care reform in America has been caught in a grinding legal trap. Congress would pass meaningful legislation, and before seniors could feel a single benefit, industry lawyers were in federal court arguing constitutional limits on federal authority. Nursing home staffing rules got buried in injunctions. The authority to negotiate Medicare drug prices got challenged the moment it was signed into law. Funding earmarked for accessible senior housing got frozen in legal dispute. The people who needed relief the most kept waiting while the argument stretched on. What the Supreme Court has now done is answer the central question underneath all of those fights with unmistakable clarity. Does the federal government possess the constitutional power to set binding elder care standards, hold nursing facilities accountable, and push senior healthcare reform through the Medicare and Medicaid systems already in place? 7 of the 9 justices looked at that question and answered yes. Only 2 said otherwise. That gap matters more than people realize. A 5-4 ruling carries the feeling of something temporary, something that shifts with the next vacancy on the bench. A 7-2 ruling tells every lower court, every federal agency, and every industry lobby that the constitutional ground beneath these reforms is not going to crack the legal strategy that has been suffocating elder care progress for years. Just lost most of its oxygen. What seniors have been waiting for is now cleared to move. Here is what that movement looks like across every area it touches, starting with the change that hits the largest number of people the hardest and the fastest. Prescription drug pricing comes first because this fight has been burning for the better part of 20 years, and the Supreme Court just extinguished the last legal firebreak blocking full implementation of Medicare drug price negotiation. For decades, the law actually forbade Medicare from doing what every other major pharmaceutical buyer on Earth does, without a second thought. Medicare covered more than 65 million Americans and was legally prevented from negotiating the price of the drugs those Americans depended on. Private insurers could negotiate, the Department of Veterans Affairs could negotiate, But the largest single drug purchaser in the country was forced to pay whatever the manufacturer listed. The consequence was predictable and cruel. Seniors in the United States were paying prices for common medications that were 3, 4, and sometimes 8 times higher than what people in Canada, Germany, or Japan paid for the identical product from the identical manufacturer. A medication priced at $300 monthly here sat on pharmacy shelves abroad for under $50. The people absorbing that gap were overwhelmingly retirees living on fixed incomes, with no leverage and no alternative. With this ruling clearing the final legal obstruction, Medicare Negotiation Authority now moves forward without interference. If chronic condition medications, whether for diabetes, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, or arthritis, are currently draining $200 to $500 or more from your budget every month. The pricing structure that made that possible is now legally dismantled and scheduled for replacement. The ruling also locks in the annual out-of-pocket spending cap for Medicare drug coverage, meaning there is now a hard ceiling on what you can be required to pay in any given year, regardless of your medication list. For seniors who have rationed pills or skipped refills to stretch a fixed income, this is not incremental progress. It is a fundamental rewriting of the financial risk equation. Social Security is the second area, and specifically the inflation adjustment formula, that has been quietly shortchanging seniors for years, without most people fully understanding how or why. The program was designed as a guarantee: work, contribute, and when the working years end, a reliable monthly income follows you into retirement. But the measurement tool used to protect that income from inflation was never built with retired people in mind. The cost of living adjustment is calculated using spending data drawn from working-age urban employees. Retired seniors spend their money in a completely different pattern. Healthcare prescriptions and in-home support consume a far larger share of senior budgets than they do for younger working adults. And those specific categories have inflated faster than almost any other part of the economy. The result is a calculation that tells seniors their purchasing power has been protected when their lived experience says otherwise. Over a decade, that compounding error represents thousands of dollars of real lost income. The reforms advanced by this ruling push forward a replacement index built around actual senior spending. Your annual Social Security adjustment will begin tracking what retired life genuinely costs, rather than what a working adult in a city spends. For the average beneficiary, that shift adds up to meaningful additional income over time. And on a fixed retirement budget, meaningful is not a minor word. The ruling also provides legal clearance for the structural reforms designed to prevent the trust fund shortfall from triggering automatic, across-the-board benefit cuts. That threat had been hanging over the program for years. The path to stopping it is now legally unobstructed. Nursing home reform is third, and in terms of immediate human stakes, it may be the most urgent piece of this entire ruling. The conditions inside a meaningful percentage of American care facilities have been a documented disgrace for a long time. Federal reports have shown repeatedly that serious violations, understaffed floors, leaving residents without basic care for hours, medication errors causing preventable injury, improper use of physical restraints, inadequate food and hygiene, and, in the most disturbing cases, deliberate abuse of people who were entirely dependent and entirely defenseless, were not isolated incidents, but systemic patterns, and the financial consequences for facilities that operated this way were calibrated to be ignorable fines that fit neatly into an operating budget, absorbed and forgotten without anything actually changing. That calculation is now over. Nursing facilities receiving Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, which covers the vast majority of every care home operating in this country, are now subject to enforced minimum staffing ratios. Real human beings, trained and present at legally required numbers relative to the resident population, not ratios that exist in a binder and vanish when the inspector leaves. What that means in human terms is that when your parent, your spouse, or someone you love presses a call button, someone will actually come. Penalties for safety violations have been restructured to hurt rather than to inconvenience. Repeat violators now face the loss of Medicare and Medicaid funding, which, for most facilities, is not a financial penalty. It is a death sentence for the business. That is an entirely different category of deterrent. Facilities are also now required to make staffing data, inspection results, and violation records genuinely and easily accessible to the public, so that families making one of the hardest decisions of their lives can do it with real information instead of marketing language. Financial fraud protection against elder exploitation is fourth. And this is where I want to slow down and be direct, because the scale of this crime and the silence around it are both completely out of proportion to the damage it causes. American seniors are losing tens of billions of dollars every year to financial predators, operating through every channel imaginable. Fake government agency calls demanding immediate payment, identity theft used to file fraudulent Medicare claims, investment schemes built on invented returns, emotional manipulation, targeting people who are widowed and isolated home repair contractors who collect payment and disappear, and the cases that carry the deepest damage. Trusted family members and caregivers who drain accounts slowly and quietly over months or years from people who never imagined they needed to be protected from someone they loved. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has documented elder financial crime as one of the most rapidly expanding criminal categories in the country. Underreporting is massive because shame and confusion keep victims silent, and by the time the crime becomes visible, the losses are often unrecoverable. The reforms now funded and authorized by this ruling build a genuine institutional response. More investigators specifically trained to pursue financial crimes against older Americans. More resources for victim support and recovery. Tighter coordination between federal law enforcement, state agencies, and the financial sector where these crimes so often. First, leave a detectable trace. Banks and credit unions operating under significantly strengthened guidelines are now expected to recognize and flag the behavioral signatures of exploitation: unusual withdrawal patterns, sudden changes to account access, rapid transfers to unfamiliar destinations, and to report them through formal channels rather than absorb them as someone else's problem. Public education funding is also included because informed seniors are the most effective defense. When you know exactly how these schemes are scripted and structured, the script stops working. Housing and the right to remain home is fifth, and for most seniors, this is not a policy question. It is personal, in a way that very little else is. The home where decades of life happened, where children grew up, where a lifetime of ordinary and irreplaceable moments accumulated, is not an asset to most older Americans. It is identity. It is safety. It is the place where they want to remain. But the physical structure of most American homes was designed for people decades younger, and the gap between what a home looks like at purchase and what it needs to look like for safe aging can be expensive. To close stairs become fall hazards. Bathrooms without proper support fixtures send hundreds of thousands of seniors to emergency rooms every year. Narrow doorways block walkers and wheelchairs, and the cost of closing those gaps is frequently beyond what a fixed income can absorb without help. The reforms now cleared by this ruling expand access to grants and low-interest loan programs that cover ramps, doorway modifications, walk-in shower conversions, lighting upgrades, and kitchen and bathroom safety improvements. These are not renovations. They are the physical conditions of continued independence. And for many seniors, the alternative to affording them is a premature move into a facility. Broader affordable senior housing investment is also included, designed around accessibility and genuine social integration, because the research on what chronic isolation does to an aging body is not ambiguous. The health damage from persistent loneliness in older adults is measurable, serious, and comparable to the effects of a significant daily smoking habit. Housing that keeps people connected is not a social nicety. It is a medical intervention. Mental health access is sixth, and the gap here has been both wide and quiet for too long. Medicare's coverage of mental health services has historically been complicated to navigate, limited in scope, and financially unattractive to providers because reimbursement rates have made it economically difficult for therapists and counselors to build practices around Medicare patients. Meanwhile, the population that needs these services most has often been the least likely to ask for them. Older Americans grew up in a cultural moment when emotional struggle was managed privately, when admitting you were not coping was associated with weakness, when professional mental health support was something other people needed, but the emotional weight of later life is real, and it is heavy grief over the loss of a spouse, a close friend, a brother or sister, pain that is chronic and that does not resolve. Fear about cognitive changes, about becoming dependent, about what comes next. Anxiety that has no clean name and no easy outlet. Millions of older Americans carry this every day without support. The reforms advanced by this ruling raise reimbursement rates to levels that make serving Medicare patients financially viable for a broader pool of providers. They expand telehealth mental health access so that geography and mobility are no longer barriers. And they build the infrastructure for older adults to reach professional support without the friction that has historically made the first step feel impossible. Caregiver support is seventh, and the people this addresses have been functionally invisible in the policy conversation for far too long, given what they actually carry. 53 million Americans are providing unpaid care to aging family members right now. Adult children who have reorganized careers and personal lives to manage a parent's needs. Spouses well into their own senior years, managing a partner's dementia or chronic illness. Siblings driving long distances every weekend to provide care for someone who cannot manage alone. These individuals have taken on the kind of responsibility that professional care facilities staff and compensate teams of people to handle. And they have done it without training, without pay, and without meaningful structural acknowledgement from any part of the system. The health consequences for caregivers are documented and serious. Elevated rates of depression, physical health deterioration from sustained stress and disrupted sleep, complete personal schedule subordination to another person's needs. And, historically, the response from policy has been close to nothing. The reforms now authorized by this ruling change that, with specifics. New tax credits allow family caregivers to offset real out-of-pocket expenses. Training program funding helps family members handle complex medical care situations at home safely. Expanded respite options give caregivers the ability to step back temporarily without experiencing it as abandonment. Supported caregivers provide better care. The research is consistent on this point. Supporting the people doing this work is not a sentimental gesture. It produces better outcomes for everyone. Medicare expansion into dental, vision, and hearing coverage is eighth, and the exclusion of these three categories from original Medicare has caused measurable and lasting harm that has been defended for far too long as simply the way the program was built. Employer insurance covered these gaps for working Americans, for retirees on Medicare. The gap was just a gap, and the consequences of leaving it unfilled were never cosmetic. Untreated dental disease is connected in the research literature to heart disease complications from diabetes and accelerating cognitive decline. Uncorrected vision problems are a primary driver of falls, and falls are the leading cause of fatal injury in Americans over 65. Hearing loss that goes unaddressed is among the most significant and most modifiable risk factors for dementia identified in current research. These are not comfort services, they are health infrastructure, and the cost of accessing them outside Medicare coverage has been $2,000 to $7,000 for hearing aids alone, completely out of reach for a majority of seniors on fixed incomes. The reforms cleared by this ruling include targeted subsidies for hearing aid access, expanded dental services through federally qualified health centers, pilot programs building toward broader dental coverage, and expanded vision care in underserved communities. None of this closes the gap completely overnight, but it moves the line in a direction it has never moved before now. The part that determines whether any of this actually reaches you, because knowing these changes exist and actually receiving their benefits are two completely different things, and the gap between them is action. Go to ssa.gov this week and access your My Social Security account. Create one if you do not have one. It is free and takes a quarter of an hour. That account is where your benefit information lives, where adjustments will be reflected, and where any required steps on your end will be visible. For Medicare questions specific to your coverage, contact your state's State Health Insurance Assistance Program, known as SHIP. Free one-on-one unbiased counseling from people whose entire purpose is helping Medicare beneficiaries understand exactly what they are entitled to and how to get it. No sales pitch, no fee, no agenda, except helping you. If a nursing facility decision is on the horizon for you or someone in your family, the new transparency requirements mean that inspection records, staffing ratios, and violation histories are now publicly accessible. Use them. Make the decision with real data. And take this warning seriously, because it is not hypothetical. Within days of a Supreme Court ruling, this visible criminal operations are already retooling their scripts around it. Calls, texts, and emails are coming that will claim to offer enrollment assistance for the new benefits in exchange for a fee or for your Medicare number, your Social Security number, or your bank account information. Do not engage. Do not share anything. No legitimate federal benefit requires a payment to access, and no government agency will call you with an ultimatum or a countdown. The Social Security Administration does not operate that way. Medicare does not operate that way. If a contact feels wrong, end it immediately and reach out to the official agency directly through the number printed on your Medicare card or listed on the government website. Step back for a moment and think about what this ruling actually represents against the backdrop of what seniors in this country have been living with. The moment at the pharmacy counter where you calculate which prescription you can skip this month. The visiting hours at a facility where you can see that your loved one is not getting enough attention and you do not know what to do about it. The phone call from the bank about a transaction that was not yours. The appointment you could not get because the provider did not accept your coverage. The home you want to stay in that is slowly becoming unsafe, and the renovation costs that are simply not possible on what you have. None of these are policy abstractions. They are the texture of millions of real lives, and they have continued far longer than they should have. This ruling does not fix everything in a single stroke. No court decision ever does. And the industries that profited from the conditions it is now dismantling will not stand aside quietly. They will file new challenges, fund lobbying campaigns, and push for delays and carve-outs at every stage of implementation. Staying informed is not optional. It is the mechanism by which legal victories get translated into real benefits for real people. The seniors who understand what changed, what they are entitled to, and what steps to take are the ones who will actually receive what this ruling makes possible. That is what this is for. Not just awareness, but action. You have earned this. Do not let anyone or anything stand between you and collecting it.